Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar from Fortra entitled Extending Microsoft Purview Information Protection through DLP. I'm Bill Bradley and I will be your moderator today. I want to thank you for joining our session today. We have, I think we have an hour on the clock. I'm not sure if we'll take the full time, but I wanted to thank you all again for joining us today and thank you for taking time to learn from us about data protection. So first, before we get started, a couple of things I want to take care of. Everyone on the call today, everyone who registered for the session today will get a copy of the slides as well as a recording of the session here. So feel free to listen in as opposed to try and take notes and enjoy the conversation. Next of all, there is a Q&A tab in your webinar console. Please feel free to utilize that during the session here. If you have any questions for our speakers, we encourage you to ask them during the call. We'll do our best to answer as many of those as we can at the end of the session there. At that, we'll get started with our presenters today. So first of all, again, I'm Bill Bradley. I'm Senior Director of Marketing here at Fortra. I come into Fortra through the Digital Guardian acquisition about a year or so ago. I've been in the data protection industry and been in the security industry for about 10 or 15 years there, and in IT information technology for 20 plus years. And I lead the marketing efforts for the data loss prevention, data classification, as well as digital rights management for the Fortra data protection business. And next, our highlight speaker is Chris King. Chris is the Senior Technical Director of Sales Engineering for Fortra and also comes in through the Digital Guardian acquisition. He holds both Certified Information Systems Security Professional and Certified Information Security Manager accreditations and has over 30 years experience in various information technology and information security organizations. He is a DLP expert, and his knowledge includes an extensive background in implementing information security programs in large corporate environments to help them meet both corporate and regulatory data protection environments. So with that, I'll pass the call over to Chris and we can get things started. Chris, off to you.
All right, you guys can hear me okay?
I sure can.
All right. So as Bill mentioned, Digital Guardian got acquired by Help Systems or Fortra last October, and we're part of the data protection suite, which includes DLP, which is Digital Guardian, data classification, which is Bolden and Titus, and Vera is digital rights management. So we're sort of the sweet spot in the middle. All right, so what is Purview? So they've changed the name. Microsoft, it used to be called Microsoft Information Protection or Azure Information Protection, but now it's called Microsoft Purview. So what exactly is it? It's part of an E3 or an E5 license you get from Microsoft. And its intent is to help you classify, label, and protect data, right? So it works across all their infrastructure, you know, your local desktop, Teams, and what they developed is they developed an SDK, software developers kit that allows DLP vendors like us to be able to utilize those APIs to assist in labeling or actually calling their API to, number one, can we see the data, right? Number two, can we actually protect the data on the user's behalf, right? With an E3 license, the user actually has to manually label the data. With an E5, they have the ability to utilize Microsoft's DLP to do it. But you know, our intent is to, you know, most of our clients have E3, and to be able to sort of complement that with our product. That's sort of the goal. All right, let me see. So I wanted to show you, let me see if I can actually get away with doing this. Go into my VM real quick. You guys can see my screen, tell me. You can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so when you enable MIP or Purview, you're gonna get a little tab here called sensitivity. And again, they're calling their label sensitivity label. So I'm in Word, and if you click on here, you'll actually see these are the labels I have. So I've got the default labels they give you with Azure. You get your public, your general, your confidential. Restricted is actually an encrypted label. So all the other labels are just general, you know, it is labeled this. And again, the goal of these data classification products is I cannot save this document unless I label it. Right, so that's a policy that most of our clients are using is, you know, they've got an initiative, you've got to classify your data. So you have to, you know, again, they're not going to be able to classify it if you email it or upload it. They pretty much have you, you know, when you open it, or you create a new document, you have to label this before you get out, right? That's the intent. And they've got some little helps if you want, but you cannot get away with that, right? The other one was if it was a restricted label, then again, see how it puts a little watermark in here, header and footer. So that's the idea of data classification, is the ability to set a visual marking on the file and metadata on the file that's persistent. It stays with the file once I email it, upload it, do whatever with it. This is the same document, but this is protected. So it looks a little different. When you start to think about DRM or digital rights management, you've got to think about two things. One is, what is the permissions you're going to put on the file, right? The other one is who has access to it. And speaking to clients like I do, number one, they don't trust the user to label it. Number two, they don't want the user to do any of this stuff. So they want it all automatically done behind the scenes. So let me get my PowerPoint back. So I've got a picture of this I showed you already. Let me go into presentation mode. And then this is on the left-hand side, what I showed you with the permissions, but it gets more complicated on the right-hand side, right? When you start talking about what users, organizations, or groups have access to this document. Again, a lot of our clients do not want the users to mess with this. They want it to be done at a high level. So this is part of our comprehensive classification, and on the right-hand side is what I'm calling Purview or MIP, right? It's the user-based classification. We already support content-based classification, which is the ability to content inspect a document, right? Based on keywords, regular expressions, and all that kind of stuff. Context is one of our sweet spots. Where's the file coming from? It's coming from a specific GitHub repository. It's coming from a URL or UNC path. We'll be able to label it based on that. And again, this user base is just the three-legged stool of what did the user say it was. A lot of times when you think about classification, you have to think about control at the same time. You cannot, I've been on so many calls with clients who are like, yeah, we've got an initiative to classify data. I'm like, okay, well, now what? I'm like, what do you mean? Just because you classify it, you're not going to protect it. You're just going to label it. You have to think about, once I classify it or label it, how am I going to control it throughout the channels? And again, DG is the star of the dish in the middle here that has the ability to protect all the egress channels. And again, the user classification is just one of those entries in that picture, right? So again, I can control. You cannot upload a document until you label it. You can't print a document until you label it. If you want, I can do that. So there is a synergy between the data classification and DLP. That's sort of the intent of this presentation. All right, so some of our clients, right, not all of them, are using or testing Microsoft Purview in their enterprises. We started this effort 18 months ago, if you can believe it. And the first use case was, do we have the ability to read a Microsoft protected label, right? The first use case is, I'm going to use security against security, right? How do you get around DLP? Is you encrypt the data. So I'm going to take a file, I'm going to encrypt it for myself, and I'm going to send it out, and nobody will know the difference. That was our first use case, is the ability to read labels, right? The next one was the ability to map labels to rule actions. I'll show you that in a sec. Phase 2, which started this year, was the ability to set a label. Of course, once you tell them you can read labels, everybody says, I want to set labels too. And then phase 2, which is actually 2B, which is due out end of this year, next year, is the ability to map GG tags to MIP labels, and I'll show you that. So again, if you're talking to DLP vendors, without the ability to inspect a protected document, is a huge hole, right? It's a huge hole if you can protect the data and get it out without something seeing it and controlling it. This is another thing that's important. This is a core feature to DG. There's no cost associated with this. A lot of clients don't even know we have this, right? So we have it, right? We've had it for since October of last year. Phase 1 was released last year, right? So in 7.7, that was our first version of MIP integration. And it was not just the SDK, which is actually supplied with the agent. So the MIP SDK is actually supplied with the agent. A lot of our clients don't even know that, But it was more than just that. We had to build an infrastructure around it to get it to work, right? Phase 2, which was released this year, was the ability to set the label with no user interaction. So if you copy a document to USB or to a specific share, we can actually put a protected label on it without the user seeing it. 7.9, which is again due out end of this year, beginning of next year, you're actually going to get a prompt, which we're going to map the DG labels to the MIP label, which is pretty cool. All right, so back to the SDK again. We have something in Arc. If you guys are DG users, you have to actually go into Arc to provision the Azure authentication to get to the agent. That's what gets the tokens to the agents, right? So just having the SDK is not good enough. You actually have to have authentication for the sol to work. You've got to do some configuration. I'll show a little of that in a presentation, right? What else do I got here? Other than that, this is good. Phase 1, right? We actually can append the label into the alternate data stream, so we can actually see that it was labeled. A document was labeled. Talked about the mapping, and we actually have an event. That's important. So when I label something, so I have got something, I just showed you I labeled it public or something. When I have a document that I set a label that actually sends an event, so you'll actually see that as an event. This is the back end. In terms of deployment, we have clients that are on-prem, right? You still need Arc, right, to do this. So even if you're on-prem on the bottom here, you'll be able to have what's called, we actually built a microservice, an MIP microservice running in Arc. You won't have access to Arc, but we'll actually provision it for you to be able to allow you to authenticate, right? So you have to authenticate to get the SDK to work. If you have Arc at the top, it's pretty easy to get it to work. So when it comes to integration examples, right? So let me see if I can do my demo again. Hold on. So let's go back to here. And my first use case is I'm going to upload something that is not labeled, right? So again, your typical DLP cannot see this. Actually, this is not right. Hold on. So this has no label. So back to my PowerPoint that had the egress channel, right? The idea was I, as an organization, have told my users, you have to label a document before you send it out. So again, our integration with MIP is looking at that label, and there's no label. So I'm going to tell the user they have to label it before it goes out. My other use case was I didn't realize I hit that button, was I labeled that Word document public, right? And when I did that, that was this one here. There's a mismatch, right? So back to I'll show you in a second in the PowerPoint. But in this case here, DG found credit cards or social security numbers or sensitive data in that file, and the user labeled it public. Therefore, it was a mismatch. Let's go back to PowerPoint real quick. So here's what you're seeing. Let me make this bigger. So on the left-hand side, it had no label. When you do label something, we actually call an event, but if you look here, it says MIP public. So that file I uploaded had PII, it had social security numbers in it, and it was labeled, and the user labeled it public. Therefore, when you try to upload it, I threw a prompt saying there's a mismatch. So again, we're sort of keeping the checks and balances between the MIP labels and what DG can see. In terms of Arc, this is what we see in Arc. So you can actually filter on MIP files. So again, because that MIP public is down in a tag, that will propagate over to Arc. So you'll actually can say, hey, show me all the MIP data that's being emailed, uploaded, or copied to USB or whatever. So again, all that data flows up into Arc, just as the three-legged stool, right? So I've got the content, which is custom, in this case, it had credit card number keywords, it has sensitive data, regular expressions, and it was MIP confidential. With or without rules, I'm going to see that, right? So in phase 1, we did this mapping between the MIP label and the rule action. So in this case here, you can map, and again, this is being done in ARC. I'm mapping the action, right? So it's anything that's, you know, confidential or highly confidential, I want to alert on it. So basically, this is being done via the content pack that we send down to you. So it's all integrated. So it's really easy to run. Phase 2 is the setting label. And again, it's based on specific operations, so be careful, right? So we can set a label, right, based on a copy. So you're copying something to USB, you're copying something to a specific share or moving a file in download. So if you actually do one of those operations, we can actually stop and actually set a label based on a rule, right? So based on where it's coming from, based on the UNC path or the content, we can actually apply a label based on that. And again, this happens. Phase 2, part A was automatically, meaning it just happens, the user doesn't even know what happened. Phase 2B was the ability to actually throw a prompt and sort of kind of educate the user. So we actually modified the DGMC to actually have a new action called label. See it there under action. And then when you bring that up and you have, again, MIP integrated, you'll actually get the labels on the right-hand side. So again, based on this rule, which was, you know, copy something to a folder, I'm going to actually apply a restricted label. I'm not telling the user I'm doing that. This is just, you know, if this, then do that. So this is sort of the crux of this presentation is phase 2, you know, part B was the ability to sort of map the DG tags, we call them, to MIP labels and present the user with a prompt, right? So if the prompt doesn't match the label, meaning if you haven't mapped the tag to the MIP label, we're going to give you all the labels to pick from, right? This is a much better user, you know, interface than just automatically applying a label and the user doesn't even know. We're actually going to throw a prompt saying, hey, this has got credit cards in it. So because of that, you need to label it this, or if I don't map it, it will give you the ability to actually pick a label. Okay. There's a new rule operator that kind of gets us to work, right? And again, I mentioned the security operations are just the copy, move, or download, right? We have think of it as a compensating control. So if you do a save as, if you do an upload, if you do a print, we can actually say, hey, you can't do that because you have to apply a label and sort of help you apply the label. We cannot apply a label automatically on a save as or an upload or a print or attach, right? Just copy, move, and download. All right, I think I had, so this is the mapping in ARC. I kind of wanted to show you that live. Give me a second. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. But I did want to show you the endpoint. So over here, I have a rule that says when I copy something from DLP test, one of these files, right? And again, this is the new stuff that's coming out. What I'm going to do is when it comes down, I can actually, again, map that file, right? The classification of it's got credit cards in it or something, to a label. And again, this is all being done under the covers. Originally, I could just apply a restricted label based on a rule and not tell you, but what's cool about this is that I can actually do it and kind of bring you through it. So in this case here, it's being recorded. You can click on the link, all your typical stuff you see with DG, but if I click on apply, I'm actually going to call the API and tell you I successfully applied that label, and then I'm going to hit continue, and then the file will actually be downloaded and protected. That's what's coming in the end of this year, beginning of next year, is the ability to sort of stop, tell the user, hey, that's got sensitive data. What we can sort of educate you or kind of bring it on the path of protecting that file. Let's go back to my PowerPoint. And the way that's being done is in here in ARC, right? In ARC, see where it says DG tags? We have the ability to map the MIP labels to the DG tags, and based on that, throw that prompt and put the specific label in there saying, hey, this has got PCI high data, therefore it's got to be restricted. And this is what I just showed you, right? So we've got 3 prompts we're going to provide in this later version that allow you. It's a little different user interface than what you're used to, because you saw me pull that file down. I brought the prompt up here on the left. Then I had to hit apply destination. It happened, and then it throws another prompt, and I have to hit continue. That's different than what you've seen before. Most prompts don't bring you to another prompt to do this. In terms of MIP, MIP by itself is not enabled on your endpoint, right? So we have documentation that we can provide after the call if you want, or if you email me, to kind of take you through. Again, if you didn't know we had this, now you know we have this capability, MIP. By default, it's all off, so you have to enable it, right? On the DGMC, you've got to go to ARC, and you've got to configure the Azure tokens to be able to get it all working. So we have a document that will kind of bring you through that process, but this is just one little picture of one of the configurations you need to have set for this to work. And again, these are just more pictures of what I was doing, but again, based on the content, I can basically, in this case, this prompt doesn't let me do anything other than confidential because it's mapped. This one is not mapped, therefore it gives me any of the choices. So again, we're trying to make it easy for the user to do MIP labels and sort of guide them down the path of setting the labels. And again, of course, we can control once it's labeled. Doesn't matter if you call it restricted, which is encrypted, we can actually protect it or inspect it even if it is encrypted. So again, this is the compensating control one I wanted to show you, which is this document is you're trying to upload this document, right? And again, we cannot automatically MIP protect a document while it's being uploaded, right? It's just the way the DG works. I can protect it when it comes down, right? A download, or if it's going to USB or a share or a copy. But I cannot stop the process of it being uploaded and protect it. But what I can do is I can content inspect it or context classify it and tell you when you upload it, hey, you need to label this thing. And here's what we're recommending you do label, but we cannot label it for you. So if you click the little, click here, you can open the file, right, and do what I showed you in Word. You can right-click on the document if you have the Azure client loaded and protect it that way. Or you can put it in a folder and DG will protect it for you. But we cannot do it when you upload it, or print, or save as, or attach. I think that's all I got.
All right, Chris, thank you. I appreciate all that knowledge you shared with our audience. Hopefully everyone got some good information on that one. Chris is going to stick around for a few minutes while I go through a brief introduction of Fortra for everyone out there who may be unfamiliar with us. I want to say welcome to Fortra for everyone. And if you've been to our website recently, you'll see the Help Systems website is now flipped over to Fortra. And this is Fortra, your cybersecurity ally. This has been a phenomenal rebranding effort. That's not just a rebranding effort, but it's also really about reinventing who we are as a business. So Help Systems has, and I can go through who Help Systems was in terms of the history of the business there. But looking forward, who Fortra is and who they will be is a powerhouse in the cybersecurity space. Fortra has a collection of a large number of cybersecurity brands out there that many of you will be familiar with, all now under one roof there, one organization to help you simplify and reduce the growing complexity in the cybersecurity world. So Chris, next slide, please. So what are the Fortra solutions today? And this is a collection of who we are today. So if you're not familiar with who Fortra is, you're probably familiar with a host of the brands that are underneath this Fortra umbrella there. So these are the key areas that we focus in on. So vulnerability management, brands like Beyond Security, Tripwire, Digital Defense. email security anti-phishing, so Agari, ClearSwift, Terranova, over to secure file transfer with Go Anywhere, Global Escape, offensive security, core security, Cobalt Strike, data protection. This is the Digital Guardian, Titus, Bolt, and James Vera. Digital risk protection with Fish Labs, and then the managed detection response place with Alert Logic. Where Fortra has its history there is in the IBM I solutions and automation side of things. And this is identity access management automation. So this is really the collection of what all Fortra is today. As you can see, it is a tremendous collection of cybersecurity solutions that can pay dividends to really any organization. Really, whatever your challenge is, Fortra has a solution and can help solve some of your complexities there. On the data protection space, this is the Digital Guardian for DLP, Titus and Bold and James for data classification, and Vera for digital rights management. This is what Chris spoke about with that integration between Digital Guardian's DLP and Microsoft Purview, and a little more detail of what all that means. So Chris, next slide. So the data protection suite, and this is, again, what Chris mentioned, the collection of 3 complementary solutions that all deliver data protection, and we talk about across the entire data lifecycle. So I understand the data lifecycle is truly a circle, so you can start anywhere along here, but for me, this is how to me, it logically makes sense, is starting out with data classification. And this is about understanding what data is sensitive with your organization so that you can protect it. The story being, if you can't see it and don't understand what it is virtually impossible to have an effective data protection program. Next is the data visibility and control, and this is what Digital Guardian's DLP delivers. You go back one, Chris. The data protection from Digital Guardian, and this is that single platform that gives you data protection across the entire threat landscape there. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means later. And finally, the secure external collaboration. This is from the Vera Digital Rights Management. And we understand that while a lot of your business happens within the virtual walls of your business there, in order for your organization to be successful and to grow, you, in some cases, need to share that sensitive information outside of your organization. And this is where Vera and the Digital Rights Management comes into play. So next slide, please. And this image here, there's a couple of questions in the chat who asked about what is ARC, and this is the Analytics and Reporting Cloud. And this really is the core of what, from a Digital Guardian DLP perspective, this is what our information security professionals, the team is using to really have their day-to-day operations with the DLP. This gives you the view of all the myriad events, alerts, alarms, everything that comes in from your organization, as well as sees those classification events, as well as seeing where we are protecting files. So all that information flows into this analytics and reporting cloud, and it is this one-stop shop, whether you are an information security analyst, whether you are a threat hunter, whether you are a CISO at an organization, you can use this to see what you need to see about your organizations. There are dozens of dashboards that ship with the analytics and reporting cloud that are underneath what you see here on this alarm summary page, but there's also the ability to customize it to whatever it is you need to see with your organization. Exit interviews, for example, are one of the common examples we use, and right now is a topic du jour with the number of people that are leaving organizations either on their own volition or with some of the layoffs of late. When people leave, that can always be a risk for data. So you have this exit interview that would flow into this analytics reporting cloud and allow people to see what is part of that data risk profile for each one of those people within the organization or former organization. Next slide, please, Chris. And one of the workspaces that we have, and this was developed probably about a year or so ago now, and this is something that we originally rolled out to our managed security customers, but we had such great response from them that it is now out to all of our customers there. It's called the DG Insights workspace here. And this is a way to really, you can assess the effectiveness of DLP with your organization. It is a really quick snapshot that lets you see some of the high level activities across your organization, whether in this case here, it's the riskiest users who have the most amount of sensitive data egressing, who is printing the most, who's uploading the most, who's file copying the most. This is, again, that one stop where I can look quickly and have those conversations with the organization, with the business, and say, this is what we look like today. Here is where our risk is, whether it's web, email, print, removal drive. What are the red, green, yellows across those egress vectors there? And then down at the bottom there, you can see policy violations. And this is how that has spiked or moved over time. And this, again, gives you that quick overview of what's going on with your organization. So when someone walks down the hall and says, hey, how is an information security program working these days? This is a quick way to have that view of what that effectiveness looks like. And Chris, next slide. And Chris talked about some of the core solutions that are part of the data protection there. I just want to go into a little more detail about each one of these, as well as some of the key things they can deliver there. First one, again, this is where, to me, my logical mind starts out with data classification. And it's about those three things there. It's about detecting data, and this is either when it comes in your organization via email or it's created, whether it's in motion or at rest. So you really need to find data when it comes into your organization and becomes part of your information security program once it's within your organization. Next, it's identifying it. So what is in there that is important? What are the important factors of that document there? How do you identify it? And this can be done automatically so that you can reduce that human error, which in many cases people are trying to do their best thing, their best effort there. But as we all know, people have variability out there and it's not perfect. So you're able to get that consistency. And then the third element is it's about applying that classification. So once you found it, you know what it is, how do you put a classification label on that document? And whether it is a sensitive document, is it internal, is it external, whatever it is, you can apply a wide range of classifications. A lot of times we'll say organizations, and really some of the best practices are to start with only 3 levels of classification, and that's really public, it is sensitive, and it's regulated data. And then from there, as your organization needs to expand beyond those, we certainly have the ability to go far beyond those 3 classification levels. But that's really the 3 things there. And what this gives you is those 3 outcomes there. It allows you to share data confidently. I know that I'm sharing a file that is not designed for internal use only, or if it is designed for internal use only, I know that that is going to the right person externally and it's being shared securely. You help understand the data value and the risk out there. If I know that of my terabytes and terabytes of storage there, that the majority of it is regulated data based on GDPR or PCI, I can help use that to allocate what my data protection budget looks like because I need to focus on those types of data in my organization. And finally, it's about optimizing security investments. Yeah, we're talking about data classification, how it can help inform your DLP and help fuel your digital rights management. But really, data classification solutions can really optimize any and all security investments out there because you're able to understand what is the value of that document that's either being shared inappropriately or is being targeted of attacking organization. So that's where those 3 things, key outcomes are. And next slide, please, in terms of what does this look like in practice there? Sorry, what are the differentiators? So how is our data classification, and talking about the tightest thing, different from other data classifications there that maybe a compliance-based solution is? First, it's around superior metadata. You can add multiple documents there. We have really a myriad way to mark your document, not just a simple social security number or a birthday, things like that, but there's a variety of ways you can mark your data. Next, it's about this intelligent policy engine so that you're able to handle data quickly and effectively without sacrificing effectiveness. Really, any security solution that slows down the business is going to frustrate your users there, and people will find ways around it if they can. And again, once people start looking for ways around data protection, the whole program starts to fall apart. Third, highly accurate identifiers. So deep learning, machine learning, and smart regex to identify sensitive data and remove the error. It's about looking at what those documents are, understanding what's in there so that you can accurately identify them, so you can tell the difference between a 16-digit credit card number and maybe a record number within your organization, which may look the same or they may not, but being able to really have that accuracy. And finally, the intuitive user experience. Using automation and consistent UI is what encourages classification. And the best security solution out there that is overly complex, such that the users or the administrators are not using it, is going to, again, be a waste of effort, a waste of time, and a waste of money in an organization. So next slide, please. And what does this look like? Here's just kind of a quick example when you talk about what you see versus what a tightest digital data classification can see. So we're here on the left, we have a mortgage loan agreement document there, and you and I look at it with your eyes and we can understand what this is. It has the person's name, it has social security number on there, it has address, birthday, all these things that will be perfect for someone who's trying to steal your identity. This is exactly what they want to have So you can lay these out and see what are the properties, what's the structure, what are the keywords, what are all the key elements of that in this file, in this document here. And that is really the data behind it. But data without some sort of structure behind it is just data. It's when you put some logic behind it, or it becomes more the information. And that's where you can have the categories, classification. In this case, next you have the regulatory, the regulations that driving the protection there. What are the retention rights? As you know, that if you keep data forever there, it can become a liability. The longer you have things, it just becomes more and more storage space that can present an issue to the business there. What's the legal hold, and what is the protection that needs to be pushed to this document? So this is how you can take that, what I see with my eyes versus what Titus sees, adds all these different this information to it, and that's what helps drive that data protection decision. Chris, next slide, please. So fueling that data classification and helping make it better is again, what fueling the Digital Guardian DLP is what data classification does. And Chris talked about what Digital Guardian looks like, what the DLP is, but how is Digital Guardian different from other DLP solutions? And these are the 4 core things that we consistently hear when we talk to customers who use DLP that they really value. First of all, it's cloud delivered. We were the first DLP to be truly cloud delivered. We run on AWS, and this gives you a simplified deployment, low overhead, really immediate elastic scalability, and this gives you the increased return on investment. You're not deploying and maintaining 50 or 100 different servers on your organization there. Everything is up in the AWS cloud, so that this takes it off your hands and it reduces complexity, and it enables you to get your data protection program up and running quickly. Next is the cross-platform coverage. There are very few organizations out there that the entire business runs on one operating system, one browser, and one application. And I think probably the only person who do that will be a one-person company, and that's, I think we're probably gonna, may find another person to really sell DLP to, but the most organizations have Windows, Mac, and Linux within an organization. There are Chrome, there's Edge, there's Safari, there's all different Firefox, all different browsers out there. And then it's thousands to millions of applications out there. Digital Guardian can help protect data across all of those OSs, browsers, and applications out there. Next, flexible controls. For a while, DLP had gotten a bad rap as being a binary yes or no, block or no block type of a solution out there. And that's really just not the case with Digital Guardian. We have this fine-grained controls ranging from simply logging all those activities in cases where organizations just need to see what's going on, all the way up to blocking or enforcing encryption, enforcing actions there. And all of it depends on what the risk profile is, the company there. And this visibility, and this leads to this deepest visibility. Because of those controls, and because it leads us to have this deepest visibility, we can see everything that happens with your organization's environment there, whether it is, again, across Windows, Mac, Linux, across your browsers, whatever the applications are, whether it is print screen, copy paste, USB, moving to print. These are the things that we can all see. And because of that deep visibility and the flexibility controls, one of the things that our customers really love is our ability to deploy in a policy-free environment where Digital Guardian is rolled out into organization, and we are out there watching all the data movements, seeing what's happening, essentially creating a roadmap of all the data movement in the organization. And this is what's then used to build, we say, a better policy because it's data-driven. You're seeing what's moving, what's sensitive, where is it going. And most information security professionals will say, yeah, I have a pretty good idea where my business is, where it's moving, but I don't have 100% knowledge of that one. And moreover, even if on Monday or Tuesday, I had 100% knowledge of it, on Wednesday, it may change. On Thursday, it may change. So that's where that visibility and controls leads to that differentiation. And next slide, Chris, please. And the final leg there is this digital rights management there. And this is, again, we understand that organizations are not maintaining all their data within the organization. It needs to be shared outside of the business. Whether it is with external collaborators, you're getting this information out there through the Vera Digital Rights Management, and it allows you to share information securely out to third parties. But then, if need be, you maintain the control of it, and you can revoke that share if need be at a later time. So, as an example, you have perhaps 5 organizations who are bidding on a contract for you. You give them a packet of information there. 2 of them drop out there. I'm able to revoke the rights for those 2 people from my end there. And the other 3 don't know anything's different there. They still think maybe there's 5 other people competing for the business, but the 2 people whose rights have been revoked, they can no longer see that information. So it really helps that secure collaboration without losing control of your data. And variety of different locations, data stores, it's cloud, on premises, so you can apply these rights across your organization on Windows, Mac, OS, iOS, Android, different devices there. So again, all these point to that ability to share externally. Next slide, please, Chris. And really, in summary here, this is what we talked about from Fortra for data protection. It is data classification plus data visibility control plus secure external collaboration. And this gives you that full data protection across the entire data lifecycle from when it enters your organization or is created in your organization, the classification finds, understands it, and labels it. Next, Digital Guardian DLP with that data visibility control gives you the ability to allow it to be used up to a point that you set, and at that point you can intervene, whether it is with a prompt, with a just request or justification, or even a hard block out to an end user who may be doing something that is deemed too risky by the business. And finally, when there are documents that have to go outside the business, this is where digital rights management comes into play and gives you that secure external collaboration. So that's my portion for today. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to the questions here. It looks like we have a whole bunch of questions that have come in while I was talking there. So I'm glad to hear that people are out there. So let me see if I can roll through these questions here and get started. So, all right, so a couple of them already answered the what is ARC there. Chris, I'm gonna just roll through some of these here and see if we can get some good comments there. I know we have some time for Q&A, and I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of them there. I'm gonna kind of paraphrase the first question there, but there is a question about talking about the DG endpoint rules and policies. And I think it's can you maybe talk about what are some of the types of rules and policies that can be out there, and just give a little bit of view of what the flexibility is out there, maybe help address this question.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is I think I have showed you some of those. I hear echo. Yeah, so the uploading a file without a label, right? That's one of the rules. And again, whoever asked that, I gave you my email address, and I can send you all these rules. And they're actually part of the policy pack too that we provide. But if you want, we can go over that in detail. But the one rule was, there is no label, so I'm actually checking, is there an MIP label in the document? The other one was, I do check the label, it's public, and there's sensitive data in it. That's a mismatch rule. And then when it comes to the setting of the labels, it's a little more complicated. When I did that prompt, this one here, this one right here, these are a little more complicated. But yeah, I can definitely share those rules with you if you want.
All right, perfect. Next question, and this goes back to the MIP/Purview integration. What is the support for MIP Purview on non-Windows machines, so Mac and Linux side of things?
That's a good question. So the MIP or Purview SDK does run on Mac, Windows, Linux, and Android, if you can believe it. And then the other question is, what does DG do? So of course, DG has this capability, MIP integration capability on Windows today, but on our roadmap is Mac. So I think, early next year, probably after Q1, I've seen the roadmap, and MIP phase 1, which is the ability to read the labels, is definitely going to be supported on Mac.
Perfect. Next question I have is, how does MS Purview, excuse me, support more than a single label on a file?
Got it. So that was actually something you showed here, right here. So the answer is no, right? The MIP label is a single label. So it's, high, medium, or low. You could have a sub-label. You could say it is sensitive, but it's external, or sensitive, but it's still one label, right? You can only have one label on the document. And what we're finding is some industries, especially like the government, they want multiple labels, right? Or even this picture I'm showing you here is a banking document. The idea of having multiple labels is so you don't have to content inspect it again, right? So we've already content inspected this. We've already done that work, and therefore I put this persistent metadata in the file, and it follows the file all around. So I don't have to do it again. Again, with MIP, you're sort of limited to one label. So you would have to. People that you know, again, it's part of E3, right? It's there, people use it, and some are like, it's good enough, right? Or some of them are like, no, I need more. Then they're going to have to go to another tool.
All right, perfect.
Like Titus or Bolden. Good, man.
Next question I have is, how does Purview support file revocation?
Revocation. Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I have a slide on this, but the idea, actually, I think I did at the beginning. So when I have a document that I want to protect here, right? I can set specific permissions and specific users. Again, you don't want to do this. You don't want to let the user do this. You can actually do this in a template if you have a specific template. But the problem you're going to have is that if you want to revoke that, you have to revoke everybody, right? With Vera, you could basically say, hey, I accidentally sent this to Bill. You know, I want to revoke him only and keep everybody the same. With MIP, you have to actually revoke everybody and resend everybody another document, right? So that's one of the limitations with Purview versus when it comes to revocation, it's a lot easier with Vera than it is with MIP or Purview.
All right, great. And we're going to probably do a couple more questions here, and then we'll let people have the rest of their day back. Next one I have is, if the data protection to MIP mapping is done by the end user, how do you maintain consistency in corporate levels?
So again, the ability for the user to pick the labels is because it wasn't mapped, right? So in this case here, this is the only label choice you get. It's confidential because there is PCI data in it. This use case here was, I didn't map it, therefore I'm letting the user pick, right? So I can control what they can pick, what they can pick, if you know, based on how I configure the system. Again, here I'm not giving them a choice. They have to label it confidential. Here, since it's not mapped, I'm giving them the choice. Either way, when it goes back out the door, I can say, hey, that document has PII high data in it, and you labeled it confidential or general. It should be restricted. So I can't do anything when you're labeling it locally. And again, once you label it here, you can open it and label it again. So again, I can only control it when it goes out. Again, when it gets egressed, when it gets, you know, when you do this. And again, that's why you need DLP with MIP. You just cannot tell users, oh, we're just going to classify everything and you're going to be secure. You have to be able to enforce the classification at the channel, you know, across the channels.
Okay, and I think this will probably be the last question we can handle for today, is how does Fortra's data classification suite coexist with MIP?
That's a good question. So all of these products at the bottom here, hold on, that you talked about, the Vera, not Vera, but Bolden and Titus. So our data classification suite, again, Bolden and Titus, have the ability to coexist with MIP Purview, meaning they can actually set labels themselves, right? Not with Bolden, but with Titus. Titus can actually set an MIP label and coexist with the label, meaning it can read the label too. So there is a synergy between sort of our data classification suite and Purview if you have it. Again, what we've got is hybrid. We've got clients that are like, well, some of the users don't need the multiple labels, right? Like, you know, we have an organization unit within the organization that just has specific requirements. So they're using Titus, but everybody else is going to use MIP. That actually is something that we see a lot these days.
All right, perfect, Chris. I think that covers it for the questions we have for a call today. I want to give a big thank you out to, first of all, our speaker, Chris, for taking the time today. This is great information out there. And I also want to thank everyone who joined the session live today. As I mentioned at the beginning of it, we will get a follow-up email out to everyone with both the slides as well as a copy of the recording for you all to go back and refer back to this. If there are any questions that we missed in the Q&A tab, we will do our best to follow up with you directly. I want to thank you again for all your time and enjoy the rest of your day.